Srimatre Namaha. So welcome back, everybody, to our next class on the magnificent Śrī Sūktam. Yesterday, we explored the origins of the Śrī Sūktam, and we spoke about Veda, Vid, knowledge, how they are apaurushaya, and the importance of the Śrī Sūktam, as in what exactly we are invoking, which is Agni, Jata Vedas, right? And then we spoke about the Śrī Sūktam in the context of two other sukta, the Ratri Sūktam and the Vak Sūktam, and how it's a process. The Śrī Sūktam is all about living here and interacting and relating with the world. And the Ratri Sūktam is about darkness, which is what Ratri means, right? Night. So while Śrī Sūktam is light, Ratri Sūktam is darkness, and the Vak Sūktam is the origin of both. And so the esoteric meaning is kind of hidden, in all of these hymns, and it really does require somebody else to kind of explain these hidden meanings and transmit the teaching that is hidden within this, because ordinarily, if you read the Śrī Sūktam and the meanings of it, and you'll see that on our YouTube video, it comes with the meanings. It's really just praising the goddess, Lakshmi, as being radiant or wearing this garland or that, and all that. But then it's really the secret meaning that we're after, and how this suktam is about relating with the world and cultivating this outrageous openness, right? Where we are not continuously defending, scheming, plotting our own kind of existence, right? Even on the spiritual journey, which is what we end up doing, right? So this is actually about, you can say, blowing your heart open. That's really what the Śrī Sūktam is all about. And then we spoke about the first two verses. And in the first two verses, we saw the reference to Śrī as, really a lot of references to gold, right? Gold, and how she's wearing these garlands of gold and silver. And today I just want to explore another aspect of that before we move on to the third mantra. So all of you are probably familiar with the nadis, right? The nadis, these subtle channels. So what are these subtle channels? So when we look at, the construct of the body in the yogic and tantric view, the body has, we can divide the body into three different spheres, right? There is the physical body, Annamaya Kosha, right? Which is this, that is nourished by food. And then you have the subtle body, and this subtle body, really is the one that houses energy, prana, and it houses the mind and the intellect. So the Manomaya Kosha, if you are familiar with the 5 sheets, the Pranamaya Kosha, Manomaya Kosha, and Vijnanamaya Kosha, they're all part of the subtle body. Okay, and then you have the causal body. And the way this works is that the causal body, it's called causal because it's the cause, right? It's the cause, and it nourishes the subtle body, and the subtle body nourishes the gross body. So what is this causal body? You can think of the causal body as the DNA. Okay, and so what is DNA in our view, in this tantric or yogic view? DNA is nothing other than the conglomeration of past impressions, right? You can think of this as all of our past impressions. So anytime we are in an experience, we carry the fragrance of that experience as an impression. And this impression is basically at the level of energy and at the level of emotion, at the psychic level, so to speak. And if you want to think of it, more in modern times, you can say that it's in the DNA. Okay, so the beauty of DNA is, if we think of DNA and the genes and the chromosomes and all that, those of you who are familiar with this, you don't have to be, I'm just saying. So you have all these genes, and we know actually from research now that it's not a one-way street, that you have a gene and that's that. You basically are resigned to this, how this gene is going to express itself. So for instance, you may have a gene for a particular disease. It doesn't mean that that gene is going to express itself, or it's going to flower or blossom or bear fruit, and have this disease happen to you. Why? Because modern science is showing us that there is this whole area now called epigenetics. Epigenetics means that the way we live our lives, whatever we do at the level of the gross body and the subtle body influences the causal body. As in, it determines whether these particular genes are going to, think of these genes as being in the seed form. Okay, so whether these seeds are going to become trees and bear fruit can be influenced by what happens at the level of the subtle body and at the level of the gross body. That is known as epigenetics. But for our purposes here, we can think of the causal body as this collection of stuff from our past, experiences. Okay, and because it's like a fragrance, it's called vasana, and vasana literally means fragrance. So we have this whole collection of vasanas which remain in the seed form. Most of our vasanas actually are in the seed form. Very few of them are the ones that we actually see in the form of our thinking patterns, the way we react to things, the way we respond to things, the way we take blame and not responsibility. All of that comes from our vasanas. Okay, so these are the 3 bodies. Now, in the subtle body, there is the movement of prana. No, what is prana? Prana is like the life force, right? So you can think of prana as the one that drives the mind, the emotions, the intellect, and the body. Everything that needs to happen is driven by prana. So for the cells to know what enzymes to secrete, for these particular signaling pathways to occur, the electrical pathways to occur, everything is driven by prana. And this prana traverses the subtle body in these channels known as nadis. Okay, there are 72,000 nadis, it is said, and some texts say 72 million. So whatever the case may be, there is all this prana running in these channels. So nadis are not arteries, nadis are not nerves. The nadis are not at the gross level at all. They're at the subtle level. Now, these nadis, they're crisscrossing the whole body, right? And there are 3 nadis that are extremely important for our purpose on the spiritual journey. And these 3 nadis run along the spine, and they are known as Sushumna, Ida, and Pingala. Sushumna is the nadi that runs right in the center of the spine. Now, different people will tell you it's in front of the spine, it's in the spine, it's not there at all, it runs from here to here. It's irrelevant if you ask me. That's not the point. If you argue about these things, you're missing the whole point. Okay, so don't bother with that. Just remember that there is this thing called Sushumna, because it's the practical application that we are interested in. And then on each side of the Sushumna, you have the Ida and Pingala. Okay, the Ida channel is known as the moon channel. It's the cool channel. The Pingala is the Surya Nadi, or the sun channel. Okay, it's the hot channel. So if we again want to look at this from the perspective of modern biology, you can think of it as the parasympathetic and the sympathetic system. Okay, so now you have the Sushumna, and you've seen the, you seen the symbol of medicine, where you have the staff, and then you have these 2 serpents kind of intersecting and then coming together and going along that staff. It's like that. So you have this Ida and Pingala, and they crisscross at particular levels along this central column, and they end up, on the opposite side in the brain. Okay, so the one that begins on the left will end up, so the one on the left is the Ida, which is the Chandra Nadi, ends up on the right side of the brain, and the Pingala, which is the Surya Nadi, ends up on the left. Okay, again, all this technical stuff, it's not important. I'm telling you why this is important from our perspective of Śrī Sūktam is when we say Devi is Hiranyavarnam, she is golden, and then we say Chandram Hiranmayim, we bring in this moon, we're actually referring to Devi traversing both the Ida and Pingala. She's in both. When we say she's wearing the garlands of gold and silver, she is wearing the Ida and Pingala. They are her garlands. So if they are her garlands, then where should she be? Right in the middle, isn't it? In the Sushumna. So why is this so important? So wherever these nadis, the Ida and Pingala, they cross, that's where, we can locate these primary chakras. So there are many chakras. There are hundreds of chakras throughout the body. But these that lie along the Sushumna and are crisscrossed by the Ida and Pingala are the main chakras. And yesterday we spoke about the Muladhara chakra, right? So then there are all these other chakras along the Sushumna. Now, why is this whole thing so important? Because you can think of the entire spiritual journey as the opening and the redirection of our life energy from the Ida and Pingala into the Sushumna. Ordinarily, what's happening is that the Sushumna Nadi is closed. Okay? It's closed as in we don't have access to it. We don't have access to it because of the hyperactivity of the Ida and Pingala, because this energy is continuously switching between these 2 channels. And what does that imply for the causal body? It's what I was telling you yesterday. Remember I spoke about the kleshas? The kleshas, these kleshas, the 5 kleshas, are the reason why we don't have access to the Sushumna. So Devi is already there in the Sushumna. We just can't see her. Right? We can only access the Ida and Pingala, but even that we are ignorant of. Because everything is happening automatically. So if you think of the parasympathetic and sympathetic system, they belong to the autonomic nervous system. So there are 2 types of nervous system, right? There is the central nervous system, which is the brain and the spinal cord, and the autonomic nervous system, which is the sympathetic and parasympathetic system. And it's called autonomic because we have no control over it. It is the one that decides whether your heart is going to go fast, it's going to go slow, whether your food is going to be digested, what's going to happen to your breath, what's going to happen to your blood pressure. All that is determined by the autonomic nervous system. We have no voluntary control over it, right? So what that means is we have no voluntary control over the Ida or Pingala. It's doing its thing. They're doing their thing because they're driven by what? The causal body, the vasanas. What are those? The kleshas, especially raga dvesha, right? Passion and aversion, likes and dislikes. So the dualistic way of thinking is represented by the Ida and Pingala and lack of access to the Sushumna. So when we talk about tantric sadhana, we bring up this, this word quite a bit, which is Kundalini. Right? Kundalini is what? It is this potential for the opening of the Sushumna. So think of it like that. The Kundalini is the potential for access to the Sushumna. And what is access to the Sushumna? It is to transcend the ordinary way of thinking, the ordinary way of being, which is driven by the 5 kleshas. It is to transcend it altogether and to have access to something higher. Remember I told you the fundamental view in Shaktism or in Tantric Shaivism is that who we are is divine. We just don't know it because of avidya. Right? So when we say we want this opening of the Sushumna or access to the Sushumna, it means this understanding and the knowledge of our true identity. And for that, we have to transcend what is happening with the hyperactive Ida and Pingala. And those are hyperactive because of the kleshas, which are driven by the vasanas, our DNA. So, have you heard, there are some teachings, usually new agey kind of teachings that say, well, this practice or this is going to change your DNA. And then a lot of people just laugh about it and say, this is right. Actually, there's truth to it. Because what we are saying is our practice and our sadhana is like epigenetics. It can influence whether those seeds, our vasana seeds, are going to turn into trees or not. We have the ability to change that. Okay, so here the esoteric meaning of the Śrī Sūktam is we are asking Agni, bring this Devi to me. Bring her to me from all directions. All directions where? Not from the outside. All this energy that is scattered everywhere, bring her into the Sushumna. Let me open to her presence in the Sushumna. Let me get over my kleshas. But you see, she doesn't come that easily. Because for her, for Mahalakshmi to show herself in the Sushumna, something big needs to happen, which is we need to understand how to relate in the world. That is through cultivation of generosity, right? This open-heartedness. So it's a very different sadhana, right? So that was the recap of yesterday's class. So now, and then, you know, we spoke about the path going from Pashu to Vira to Divya, right? Pashu is the herd mentality. And so when we say herd mentality, we say we are really talking about this autonomic nervous system, right? Or the Ida and Pingala. We just follow the Ida and Pingala blindly. That's the Pashu. The Vira is the one who is aware of how these reactions and the Ida and Pingala are getting activated, how the, you know, the Surya, the sun and the moon are activated, and cultivates that continuous awareness that will then burn those vasana seeds so that they never blossom, so that they never come to fruition. So think of this whole journey as one of epigenetics. So if anyone, you know, questions you about your spiritual path, your sadhana, and says, what is all this unscientific thing you're doing? Send them to me. But better yet, answer this yourself. Understand that this is a scientific process. Okay? So we are on our way to become Viras, right? We want to become the warriors. We don't want to be slaves to our vasanas. So see, this is why in tantric sadhana, there is such great reverence to the sun and the moon. And you'll see it throughout the Śrī Sūktam. Devi is radiant like the sun, she is cooling like the moon. In fact, the whole of Sri Vidya can be described as the worship of the moon. Because we want to become moon-like. In this instance, if I am becoming the moon, then what is the sun? The sun is the self. And the moon only responds to the sun, right? The moon doesn't respond to anything else. Because the moon's light is reflected, it's reflected light from the sun. So you cannot influence the light of the moon by anything other than the sun. That's how we want to become. We only want to respond to that highest self. We don't want to respond to our own ignorance, avidya, our kleshas. So that's why this worship of the moon is, and all the moon phases and all this is so important. And you'll see even Lalita Mahatripura Sundari, she wears, you know, the crescent moon in her crown. And this moon has immense significance in Shaktism. And it is because of this. Okay, so today we're going to move on then to the next two verses. Now, I hope you all did your homework and you contemplated Gajalakshmi, the heaviness of blame versus the heaviness of the groundedness of responsibility. I hope you're feeling a little bit like elephants. Not because you ate too much. Right? I hope you did the homework, and in our QA session, I would love to hear some of your insights from your homework. So now we are going to go on to the third verse. Now, what I want to do is I want to see all of you make an effort at the chant. So in other words, I want to see your mouths moving. Don't be shy. It's okay. You don't have to know how to chant, but at least I want to see you making an effort.
Do you want our mic on mute?
Okay. Did somebody say something?
So Anne was saying, should her mic be on mute? So Anne, yes, one of us is chanting with Kavita ji. So when
Yes.
she chants, so that there's no feedback. So today it will be me. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. But I want to see everybody's lips moving. So what will happen is I'm going to chant the first two verses, and then Meena is going to do the call and response after me for the third verse. You can also chant along with me for the first two verses. Hiranyavarnam harinim suvarnarajtasrajam Chandram hiranmayi lakshmin jatavedo ma'avaha Tam ma'avaha jatavedo lakshmi manapagamini Yasyam hiranyam vindeyangamashvam purushanaham. Meena? Ashvapurvam rathamadhyam
Ashvapurvam ratamatyam. Ashvapurvam ratamatyam.
Hastinada prabodhinim
Hastinada prabodhini. Hastinada prabodhini.
So the whole line, I'll chant once. Ashvapurvam rathamadhyam hastinada prabodhinim
Ashtapurvam radamatyam Hastinada prabodhini. Ashtapurvam radamatyam Hastinada prabodhini.
Okay, very nice. So we have to be really precise with our pronunciation in Sanskrit. Okay, so it is ratha, not the, ratha tha. Okay, Ashvapurvam rathamadhyam hastinada prabodhinim
Ashtapurvam Ashvapurvam ratavat. Sorry, Kavita, can you repeat again?
Ashvapurvam rathamadhyam
Ashvapurvam ratamatyam
hastinada prabodhinim
Ashvapurvam ratamatyam Hastinada prabodhini.
One more time.
Ashvapurvam ratamatyam Hastinada prabodhini.
Shriyam Devi Mupahvaye
Shriyam Devi Upahvaye
Shriyan, na. Okay, Shriyam, you can say Shriyam, but that's for, it won't be wrong. But those who know Vedic chanting will know that you don't know Vedic chanting. Okay, so Shriyan, because what's coming after Yam is the. So the Anuswara takes on the Anuswara of that Varga. Okay, so Shriyan Devi Mupahvaye.
Shriyan Devi Mupakvaye. Shriyan Devi Mupakvaye.
Shrirma Devir Jushatam.
Shrirmar Devi Jushatam. Shrirmar Devi Jushatam.
Shriyan Devi Mupahvaye. Shrirma Devir Jushatam.
Shriyan Devi Mupakvaye. Shrimar Devi Jushatam. Shriyan Devi Mupakvaye. Shrimar Devi Jushatam.
I'll say the whole thing so you can repeat after me. Ashvapurvam Rathamadhyam Hastinada Prabodhinim Shriyan Devi Mupahvaye Shrirma Devir Jushatam.
Ashvapurvam Ratamadyam Hastinada Prabodhini Shriyan Devi Mupakvaye Shrirmar Devi Jushatam.
Yeah.
Ashvapurvam Ratamadyam Hastinada Prabodhini Shriyan Devi Mupakvaye Shrirmar Devi Jushatam.
Okay, next one. Kam Sosmitam.
Kam Sosmitam. Kam Sosmitam.
Hiranyaprakaramardran.
Hiranyaprakaramardran.
Jwalanti. Oh, sorry. Keep going.
Hiranyaprakaramardran.
Jwalantin triptan tarpayantim.
Jwalantim triptan tarpayantim. Jwalantim triptan tarpayantim.
Let's try this whole line. Kam sosmitan hiranyaprakaramardran jwalantin triptan tarpayantim.
Kam sosmitam hiranyaprakaram ardran jwalantim triptan tarpayantim. Kam sosmitan hiranyaprakaramardran jwalantim triptan tarpayantim.
So the correct way of chanting this is one breath. There cannot be any breaks. Okay? Kam sosmitam hiranyaprakaramardran jwalantin triptan tarpayantim.
Kam sosmitam hiranyaprakaramardran jwalantim triptan tarpayantim.
Padme sthitan padmavarnan.
Padme stitam padmavarnan. Padme stitam padmavarnan.
Tamiho pahvaye shriyam.
Tamiho papvaye shriyam. Tamiho papvaye shriyam.
Padme sthitam padmavarnan tamihopahvaye shriyam.
Padme sthitam padmavarnam tamihopahvaye shriyam. Padme sthitam padmavarnam tamihopahvaye shriyam.
So the same rule applies here. Padma varnan. Okay? Not varnam. You can say that. There's nothing wrong with it. We want to learn the correct way. Okay? So padme sthitam. That sthitam will be but padma varnan will be na. Okay? Then tami hopa vayesh. Okay? So let's try the whole thing. I'll chant it once. Kam so smitam hiranyaprakaramardraн jvalantin triptan tatpayantin padme sthitam padmavarnan tamihopahvaye shriyam.
Kamso sthitam hiranyavarnam
Hiranyaprakaramardraн
Kamso smitam hiranyaprakaranatran jvalantim trittan tarpayantim padme sthitam padmavarnan tamihopahvaye shriyam. Kamso smitam hiranyaprakaranatran jvalantim trittan tarpayantim padme sthitam padmavarnan tamihopahvaye shriyam.
Wonderful. So it just sounds easy when somebody is chanting it, right? It's much harder when you have to actually chant it. It's because there are so many rules to this Vedic chanting. But let's look at the important thing here, which is the meaning. Okay, thank you, Meena. So the third one says, Ashwapurvam Rathamadhyam. So now, remember the first two verses, we were invoking Devi, but through Agni and saying, Jatavedas, please bring Devi to me, right? And now we are going to see how Devi is actually going to show up. Okay? So it's one thing to say, okay, I want this. But then how do you want it? Right? Especially how do you want this, the creator? How do you want this creator to show up? It's a pretty hefty proposition, right? To say to Agni, you know, this is how she's going to show up, right? Ashwapurvam Rathamadhyam. So Ashwapurvam means she's going to arrive with horses in the front. Purvam means before. So there are Ashwa means horses. So Ashwapurvam, the horses will be leading. Ratha Madhyam, in the middle there will be a chariot. Ratha means chariot. Ashwapurvam Ratha Madhyam. So if there are horses in the front, there's a front, and the middle, there has to be something in the back, right? Which is Hastinada Prabodhini. Right? What does that mean? Hastinada Prabodhini. So there will be behind the chariot elephants. But the elephants are not just like kind of walking silently. They are announcing her arrival through these humongous roars and trumpets. So Shriyam. Shriyam means this Devi. Shri. This Shri, the most auspicious, Devim, this Devi, Upahvaye. So, Upa is a very, very important word for us. Please take note. Upa means near. So, you've heard Upanishad, right? Upanishad means Upa. It has that, it has that prefix, Upa. Upa means near. So, this is extremely important for us. We're saying Upahvaye. I want her to be near, always near. Right? How near? As close as my very prana. Right? That's the proximity I want of Devi. Not somewhere there, please. Thank you. So this is the difference. Here I want to tell you a secret Gudartha. You've heard of people talking about sadhana, and then some people say upasana. You've heard these two words, right? Sadhana, upasana. What's the difference? Are you a sadhaka or an upasaka? So Śrī Vidya, actually, people don't say Śrī Vidya sadhakas. They say Śrī Vidya upasakas. What does that mean? Sadhana means you do your sadhana and then you go about your life. Upasana means you're continuously in the presence of. You're continuously sitting near. So the practice, the lifestyle, the way of thinking, the way of being, the way of feeling, the way of relating, everything is one. It's not like you're doing your sadhana, you're going and living your life. Right? You do your meditation and then you go to work and then that's it. And then you come back, you do your meditation again. That is a sadhaka. And for an upasaka, at all times, it is sadhana. There is no difference between life and practice. Everything has aligned. That's the kind of nearness and proximity we want of Mahalakshmi. Upahvaye, right? Upahvaye, Shri again, we are saying this Shri, this goddess. Shri Ma, to me, bring her to me. May this goddess who's in this chariot, being drawn by horses, being followed by trumpeting elephants, please Jatavedas, may she be pleased with me so that she's always in, close proximity to me, so that I may never forget her presence. I don't want to be a sadhaka. I want to be an upasaka. So that's what we're saying here. So we're basically saying in this verse, I'll break it down more for you. So we're saying, I imagine Devi, right? You're saying to Agni, she's arising. Where is she arising, by the way? In the Sushumna, right? In the Sushumna, she's arising in this chariot that is being drawn by horses, and she's being announced. Her presence is being announced by elephants that follow her. Okay, so, and let me never leave her proximity. Okay, so the next verse says, now we're going to describe Devi. Right? This is probably the most moving mantra of the whole Śrī Sūktam. Now, okay, there is Devi in the chariot, but what's she like? How does she look? Kam Sosmitam. Kam means calm, that ka, that syllable ka, the sound ka, has a humongous significance. Ka means the intelligence, that primordial intelligence that drives the universe. So the Panchadashi mantra of Sri Vidya starts with ka in the Kali Vidya, because it has this humongous significance. Ka. Okay. Kam Susmita, this intelligence who is presenting as Devi, she only has a hint of a smile. You know, when we think about Lalita Devi in the Lalita Sahasranam also, you know, we describe her as this radiant, beautiful goddess who only has a hint of a smile. And in that hint of a smile is hidden the mystery of creation. So it is said that when Shiva looks at, you know, Tripura Sundari, he goes completely mad. Just that smile. Because it's so sweet and innocent and seductive. Right? Kam Sosmitam. This hint of a smile. Hiranya Prakaram. She is surrounded by a wall, so to speak, of gold. Again, this radiance. Ardram. Remember how I told you there are these elephants drenching her? She is moist, but she is actually untouched. The paradox. Ardram means the moist one. She's not dry. She's not jaded. Right? She's moist, youthful, always ever youthful. Right? Jvalanti. Ardram Jvalanti. She is moist, and yet she is burning. See again this reference to the moon and the sun. Ardran Jvalanti. She is moist and soft, and yet she is burning. She is like, you know, radiant, so radiant that she emits these flames. Right? Triptam. She's content. She wants nothing. Nothing that you can possibly offer her is going to add or take away from her contentment. Okay, Triptam Tarpayanti. It is because she is so overflowing with contentment herself that she herself can grant contentment. Can you possibly go to somebody who is miserable and ask them for contentment? Can you go to somebody who's hateful and ask them for love? You first have to have it, right? You first have to own it to give it. So because she is so content, ever content, self-effulgent, that she can, with one glance, she can grant contentment. And how does she arise? Padme Stitan. She's sitting on a lotus. Or she is situated on a lotus. Sitting, standing doesn't matter. She's situated on a lotus. Padma Varnam. In fact, she is identical to the lotus. Right? All these words have inner esoteric meanings. So when we talk about Padma, the lotus, so where does the Padma grow? Padma grows in, the lotus grows in marshy waters, right? Muddy waters. And this is why the lotus has such a huge significance in, Hindu texts, because it grows out of the mud and yet it remains untouched in its beauty. So what happens to us when we become upasakas of Shri, of the Śrī Sūktam? We become like lotuses. This world is the muddy water, and we grow out of it. We blossom out of this, whatever our situation is, we blossom out of it, right? Padma Varnam. In fact, that blossoming itself is Shri. Tam. Okay, so the Padma Varnam, Tam, Iha. Tam means to that Shri. Iha is here. Upahvaye. Again, here's that word again. This Devi, who's situated on the lotus with the hint of a smile, right? Who is moist and yet is effulgent and radiant and full of luster. May she never leave my side. May I always be in her proximity. In fact, please have her take over all of my working processes. The gross body, the subtle body, and the causal body. See, the kicker here is she already is the one that's calling the shots. Here we are saying, may I realize that? Right? Because here I think I have some control over things. Let me recognize that she is already near. Right? Shriyam, again, this goddess, Shri. Okay, so you see how if you read the meaning of the Śrī Sūktam, you'll just understand this as a bunch of praises. But then you have to tease through all of these, esoteric meanings, the secret meanings. So here, basically for this fourth verse, the summary is, again, we are addressing Agni and saying, the Shri that I'm invoking, who is the creative intelligence of the universe, who has a slight mysterious smile. She's surrounded by a wall of gold, right? What is this wall of gold? That wall of gold is the Sushumna Nadi, this column of gold, right? The one who is moist. What is up with this moist? See, it is all about flow. Things that are dry don't flow. Simple. You need moisture for flow, flow to happen. One of my favorite namas of Lalita Devi is Nitya Klinna. I adore that name. And Nitya Klinna is also one of the Nitya Devis. She's the third one. And the reason I love this so much is Nitya Klinna means ever moist. And it has so many meanings to it. She's always orgasmic. Right? See, she's always drenched in that Shringara Rasa. But it also means she's ever flowing. You can't pin down Lakshmi. You can't make her stay somewhere. So it says, in the Vaishnava traditions, it says if you want Lakshmi You must worship Vishnu. You remember I told you the story where she comes out of this ocean of nectar and then everybody wants her, and then she just ignores everybody and goes straight to Vishnu because he was ignoring her. She goes and she becomes assimilated in him. Lakshmi is extremely fickle-minded. She's like deer. Remember the deer? Always vigilant. Like any little thing, it's gone. Harini. She just leaves. You've all had this experience, right? You think, oh, my life is so full of auspiciousness, and bam, it's gone. She never sticks around too much in any one place. But she will stick around if Vishnu is there. Because her only allegiance is to Vishnu. He's the only one she cares about. So it says, actually, if you really want Mahalakshmi, worship Vishnu. Because she's always there in his heart and she won't leave. So that inherent quality of Lakshmi is to continuously be flowing. And so now think about money. Money needs to be flowing. You can hoard it. You may even do well with the hoarding. But eventually, she will leave. There will be an economic crash. There will be some kind of devaluation of that money. There will be some kind of disaster. You will be forced to part with it. Maybe not in your generation, your kids or their kids. It's at some point, it's bound to happen. Because she cannot be tied up. So this is why, you know, in so many traditions it says, whatever you earn, give away a part of it. Keep it flowing. Because she's Ardram. Don't try to hold her down because she does not like that. Her very nature is to flow. See, you have this creative intelligence, like, you know, the supreme creative intelligence is Mahalakshmi. Do you think you can pin her down into one thing and say you stay here? It's quite irrelevant to her, right? From her perspective, if you can think about things from her perspective. Whether you're a sinner or whether you are, you know, a saint, it's quite irrelevant to her. She just wants to keep flowing. From her perspective, both the sinner and the saint are hers. There is no differentiation. Like the sun, which shines equally on flowers and weeds. See, if she is self-effulgent, radiant, like the sun, she is the sun. She is the radiance of the sun. She doesn't care, you know, who you are, where you've come from. She is going to shine on you anyway. So when we understand these things, we see, you know, there is so much resentment in the world today, right? How is it that, you know, no, there should be equal distribution of wealth. There should be no ultra rich people. There should be no ultra poor people. The rich should take care of the poor. These are all our thoughts. You think she cares? For her, it doesn't matter. She just wants to keep flowing. If she's not flowing, we'll come to that later, that's known as Alakshmi. If she is not flowing, that is the opposite of Lakshmi. And if she is not flowing to where you think she needs to go, the problem is not with her. The problem is lack of upasana. That's why she's not going there. She's not going somewhere because she hasn't been invited the right way. So what we need to learn is to invite her the right way. Give her the respect that she deserves. And realize that by nature, she is going to flow. Which means nothing that you own is actually yours. Think about that. This computer you're using, this house you're in, this couch you're sitting on. You've been going around thinking, yes, this is my house, my family, my thing, my that. You know, it's mine, 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 mine. And then, you know, we spend a whole lifetime guarding what's ours. The first thing that needs to happen is, of course, responsibility, right? The next thing that needs to happen is this realization that what comes will go because it doesn't belong to us. She will go where she needs to go, regardless of what we think she should be doing. Both the asuras and the devas thought they should, you know, she should come with them. She just ignored everybody and went to Vishnu. So we may have all these ideas about, you know, activism and what is fair, who should get what. She doesn't care about any of that. As far as she's concerned, whatever you think is yours is not yours. It's hers. Including what? This whole gross body, subtle body, causal body. This too belongs to her. The wealth of this stuff that we think is ours belongs to her. Your health, your illness, your annoyances, everything belongs to her. See, but we are very clever that way, right? We want to say, yeah, that's true. All my annoyances, but you know what? My kids, they're mine. My bhakti, no, please don't touch that. That's mine. My ideas, my knowledge, what I think I know, no, that's mine. We're very, you know, we have this attitude of selective delegation of what is mine and what is hers. And that's where our problems lie. So we are saying here, she is lustrous, she is ever content. She needs nothing from us. But the one who confers contentment, the one who is situated on a lotus, the one who is the lotus, she is the one I want. So my guru, my Sri Vidya Guru always says, you know, he told me once, we were talking about a particular sadhana. And, you know, he was answering questions to somebody else, and that person wanted to do something else, you know, a particular sadhana for this or that. And he answered all of their questions. And then he turned to me and said, never do that, Amma. Never ask her for this or that, because she's very clever. She'll give it to you, but she won't herself come to you. Always ask only for her. Don't ask for anything else. Right? So this is the gist of these two mantras. So now the syllable ka that I was talking about, kam sosmidam, ka, right? So this ka, the syllable, the sound ka, and if you see in the Vijnana Bhairava Tantra, Abhinavagupta, not Abhinavagupta, the sages of Trika also, they actually bring in this practice, bring in the practice of ka and say, can you actually, that one of the yuktis is to try to pronounce ka without the a, and you won't be able to. And in that yukti of that practice, you enter this state of awareness. And this ka has huge significance here, because the ka is the it refers to Brahman. Brahman, as in Shiva Shakti, the supreme Shiva Shakti, the ultimate reality, which is formless. See, here we have personified this formless Brahman into a female form. So, my guru's guru, so Guruji, Amritanandanatha Saraswati, he would say that we create God in our own image. Right? We create God in, how we say that God created man in his own image. How do we know what God looks like? We just assume that, right? So for instance, if your cat found spirituality, how do you think the cat would visualize this formless Brahman? As a cat, right? If it's a dog, the dog will, imagine God to be like a perfect dog. So we imagine the formless Brahman to be this perfect human being. And we say, well, if it's a creative energy that we want to invoke, it must be female, because females are the ones that give birth. But actually, Brahman has no form at all. And that's what we are referring to here with ka. And there is this thing called, there is also ka and kha. Right? Those of you who know Sanskrit, ka, kha, the aspirated sound. That ka refers to this akasha, the spaceless space in which all of creation takes place. So there is this thing called Khechari Mudra. Have you heard of it? Khechari Mudra. Khechari. So there is a mudra, actually. There is a Khechari Mudra where your tongue goes up, and reaches the palate, the nasal palate from the back, and you're able to close off all openings. And there are certain practices that are done with that. That's known as Khechari Mudra. But actually, Khechari as a realization is to roam in that space, free of the bindings of the world. To be able to roam freely in that space is known as Khechari. And so ka is Brahman, the supreme formless Brahman. She's the one who's taken on this form. And you can think that I think of it as she's smiling a little because she's trying to fool us all by taking on this form, right? And she knows the mystery of it all, right? So the this unmanifest formless Brahman is what becomes form. What becomes the material world, Prakriti. So when we say Kam Sosmitam, that she is the formless Brahman who's taken on a form, she has become Prakriti. Right? Prakriti is what? All the 5 elements. Right? You remember that? All the 5 elements, the 5 tanmatras, you know, the 5 senses, the sense organs, and so on and so forth. All of this is Devi. So when we are invoking Devi, it is our understanding that everything is her. So when everything is her, how should we relate with the world? How is this upasana going to happen? How is it possible for her to always be in our proximity? Only if we relate skillfully, right? Relate with everything at the level of the world with the understanding that it is none other than Mahalakshmi. Your kids who give you a headache. Your boss who just is always on your case. Your disease that doesn't let up. Your teachers who may be always pestering you, giving you a bunch of things to do. You know, these annoyances, how will we relate to them if we knew that was all Mahalakshmi? That is the whole summary of the Śrī Sūktam. Okay, so the whole issue here of Ashvapurvam, right? She who is driven by the horses. So now you know this, some of you know this, that in the Kathopanishad, there is this beautiful description of the body as a chariot. Have you heard of this? So if you haven't, no worries, we'll talk about it. So it says here in the Kathopanishad, the self with the capital S, is the rider in the chariot, where the body is the chariot, the buddhi is the driver, and the mind is the mind is the one that controls the reins. Okay, the reins. So the senses are the horses. So the objects which they perceive, right? They are the horses, and the objects that they perceive are the horses. And so the reins of those senses is really the mind, and the driver is the intelligence, and this body is the chariot, right? So the buddhi, or this intelligence, which is the charioteer, this is the intelligence that must ensure that the horses are going where they need to go. It is the job of the intelligence to make sure that the horses go where they need to go, right? And the charioteer, the buddhi or the intelligence, needs to have what under its control? The reins, which is the mind, right? So sometimes the buddhi may let the mind, the reins a little loose, sometimes, a little tight, be able to, have these horses go left or right or whatever. But it is the buddhi, the charioteer, that makes those decisions. Because whatever decisions the charioteer makes, who's going there? The self. Who's sitting in the chariot, right? So now, by the way, the Kathopanishad, and I refer to this quite a bit because it's such a beautiful, Upanishad. This is the instruction that is given to this young boy, Nachiketa, by none other than the Lord of Death, Yama. So Nachiketa, comes across Yama and he says, give me the secret, give me the secret of this higher knowledge. And Yama, the Lord of Death, says, here, let me give you everything else. I'll give you all the riches of the world. I'll give you name and fame. I'll give you this and that. And Nachiketa, he tempts him, really well. But this young boy says, no, thank you. I only want to know the highest knowledge. And that's when Yama starts giving him this supreme knowledge of the self. So again, Upanishad, okay? So what happens if we don't have the discernment? The buddhi has no control over the mind. The mind is haywire, and the horses will take you where they want to go, not where you want to go, right? So the one who has discernment and dispassion, because what do the horses want, the senses want? The horses or the senses, they are driven by raga dvesha, those two kleshas. They always want to go where it's nice and fun and not go where, you may need to go. So I have this blog post that I would recommend that you read. It is on Shreyas. Okay, Shreyas and Preyas. So we'll share that link with you, and it's called The Quest for Shreyas. So our mind and our senses, they are always seeking out the path of pleasure and avoiding pain. So ordinarily, that's what happens. So the buddhi, the intelligence, has no say in any of it. The mind is going haywire. But that person, that sadhaka, that upasaka, who has cultivated dispassion, as in, is not driven by likes and dislikes, and wants the path of Shreyas, not Preyas, not the path of pleasure, but the path of right, the path of knowledge, is not driven by the likes and dislikes that drive the horses. And so the intellect that is, that is primed by dispassion and discernment. See, vairagya or dispassion and viveka or discernment. So Viveka, Vairagya, they are considered to be the two wings of this bird that is knowledge, jnana. You have to have both. You have to have dispassion where you may want that chocolate cake, but you say, no, thank you. You like it, but you have dispassion for it. You're not driven by likes and dislikes. But there is dispassion, but you also have to have discernment. There may be situations where you may have to do something or make a choice which isn't as clear as a piece of chocolate cake. You have to make these choices at subtler and subtler levels. The choices we make at these subtler and subtler levels, and whether the choices we make are going to take us to Shreyas or Preyas, is the test of the intellect. Viveka. So the intellect that is firm in both Viveka and Vairagya has the horses under its control. So it goes where it needs to go. So when we say Devi, is in this Ashwapurvam Rathamadhyam, she is in the chariot, who do you think we are referring to? The self. She is myself. And may I cultivate the dispassion and the discernment where she enters the Sushumna and traverses this wall of gold, this fortress of gold. When we don't have dispassion and discernment, we can't relate with the world. We can't relate skillfully with the world. We can relate, of course, but that relating will not give us the juice which comes from being moist. You see this moist, when you say moist, doesn't it evoke this juiciness in you? That juice is known as rasa. The rasa, that juice of experience. And we can't have it if our hearts are not completely open. But you see, it's not one of those things where you say, have you heard this? Maybe you have had experience of this, where people say, I'm an empath. I can feel everybody's pain, and it's, I have all this stuff, that comes up when I see people. And that's not what I'm talking about. Because that is actually a misunderstanding from the standpoint of non-dual teachings. Because there too, even when you think you're an empath and you're feeling other people's stuff, that's an absolute misnomer. Never happens. You never feel another person's stuff. You're always only feeling your stuff. In that case, you've projected what the other person may be feeling in their circumstance, and that's what you're feeling. When we say, you watch the news, you see something bad happening somewhere, and you have this immense reaction. But if you're really honest with yourself, if you're radically honest with yourself, you are feeling bad the way you would feel bad if you were in that situation. But do you actually know what that person is going through? Is it even possible to know? No. That's a misnomer. That's a misunderstanding. That's not what we're talking about here. We are saying here, I'm willing to take on your pain, not by projection. Whatever you give me, you can hate me, you can call me names, it's fine. I'm okay with it. And you see, that comes from being tripta. You have to first become content with yourself. If you don't have that contentment within yourself, you are never going to open to anybody else. You can't give contentment if you don't have it. And if you don't have contentment, you can't flow. Then you become dry, parched. You're not ardhram. And for all this, the horses that are coming in front in our day-to-day experience, they need to be reined in. So those of you who are studying with me, do you understand the importance of a lifestyle? Think about this. The moment-to-moment choice you're making in what to eat, what not to eat, what to do this, not to do this. What you're cultivating is this discernment and dispassion without really talking a whole lot about it and making a big hoo-ha out of it. Because you're reining in those horses and you're cultivating this clarity of your buddhi. You're becoming a skilled charioteer. You're not letting the horses decide where you must go. Because this is how we invite Śrī. Right? So that is like, you know, the secret teaching of the Śrī Sūktam. And so what happens is, now Devi is sitting there, right, in the chariot. And when she comes, when she arrives, it's a big deal. She doesn't come quietly. She'll announce it. The elephants behind her, they announce it. And how is this announced? Through the beginning of this rise of Kundalini. This Kundalini activation, whether it's an ascend, and you know, whether it's ascending or descending, and even this, you know, there are people that argue about this. I say, don't waste your time with all that. It's irrelevant. It's both actually a descent and an ascent. It's a simultaneous movement, actually. But again, see the significance here. Elephant, Ganapati, in the Muladhara Chakra. And he guards his mother. He guards his mother, who is Kundalini, who is sitting there in the Muladhara Chakra as this dormant, you know, potential for recognizing Śrī. And once we have started to cultivate this, a skilled charioteer, Ganapati announces the awakening of his mother, of Kundalini. And she starts to make us all upasakas. She starts to flow. So, starts to flow how? How does she make us upasakas? See, there are all these people that talk about, my kundalini is active, this is happening to me, I have this energy running around and blah, 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 blah. That's not it. An awakening of kundalini means, see, a sadhaka, the difference between a sadhaka and an upasaka is this, whether the kundalini is awakened or not. For a sadhaka, spirituality is one of the many things you're doing. You're working, you have your relationships, you have your family, and then you have your sadhana. It feels good. It's a good feeling. You feel like you're doing something for yourself. For an upasaka, everything else is secondary. This is it. There is nothing else that takes higher priority than my practice. So if that means that I need my heart broken again and again and again, I'll welcome it. I will become ardram. I'll keep flowing. Whatever comes to me, I'll give it away. Because you know why? I don't want any of it. What do I want? Devi. So an upasaka has their priorities all sorted. Whatever comes, comes. Whatever goes, goes. This is in accordance with what I told you, my guru told me. Never ask for anything. Ask only for Devi. Our problem, sadhakas, our problem is, we want Devi, but not according to her terms. We have a particular idea, like, we are giving her this human form and say, you come to me only as this. Don't come to me as this problem, as this annoying person, as this difficult relationship I have to navigate right now. No. Don't come to me as that. But she's continuously announcing her arrival. These elephants are trumpeting as what? As that difficult relationship. They are screaming her presence and saying, here she is. And we can't see it. And so we don't know how to relate because our heart is closed off. We are still only sadhakas. But we want to become upasakas. We want to keep flowing. So if that is my priority, where I want to flow at all costs, I'm going to use every movement of these horses. These horses are continuously running, right? Morning and night. The only time they settle is when you're in deep sleep. Another reason that the horses come up again and again in the Śrī Sūktam is, if you look at horses, they even sleep standing up. They're that hyperactive. Even in our dreams, they're hyperactive. So continuously these horses are taking us somewhere. But what are we doing? We are putting blinders on those horses and saying, no. My passion is here. My dislike is there. Don't go where I don't want to go. The difficult relationship, the challenging relationship, I don't want to go there. This job situation I have, I don't want to go there. This self-deception, I don't want to see. Take me only here. Morning and night, that's what we are doing with those horses. So the practice of the Śrī Sūktam is to take the blinders off the horses and say, wherever you go, I want that, because that's where Lakshmi resides and I want her. I'm flowing. Whatever the situation may be, however challenging, it's like you're welcoming it as Shri. Whatever the situation, you welcome it as, I have this opportunity to practice right now. See, one of the ways you cultivate your intellect is to become mindful, single-pointed. You're not doing too many things. You're only doing one thing at a time. You cultivate that single-pointedness. And with that, you cultivate this kind of global awareness. You're continuously aware of what's going on around you. But you have cultivated the single-pointedness. And you say, this situation that's coming to me right now, how can I apply this practice right now? Can I be fully present in this situation? Ordinarily, what happens is we approach a situation with this disdain that's going on within us. I don't really want this. You just want to get over with it and move on to what you really want to do. Isn't it true? The time, it's your time to meditate. And suddenly somebody calls you with a problem. You are aware of your time to meditate, which is, the minutes are ticking. How do you talk to that person? In that split mind. You just want to solve that problem and move on to what you really want to do, which is to meditate. Those of you who are following a lifestyle. I have to eat at 5. At 4:55, your kid comes to you with a problem. And after 5:40, I'm not supposed to eat. And this conversation is going on until 5:35. What's going on with you? Where's your attention? You just want to be done with it, right? And so that you can gobble your food. So always our minds are split. You see those horses, one horse wants to go here, another wants to go there. This mind is all over the place. But in this practice, it is to welcome every experience. As what? As Shri. And say, come. Because I want to practice now. I want to be in a continuous state of practice. That's when you become an upasaka. Right? So this whole thing, right? This whole process actually of the horses and the senses, it's actually a very biological one. Remember, I told you it's all epigenetics. So you can take some furious notes in case you want to refer to them if somebody asks you, makes fun of your sadhana, you'll have something to say. So if you look at the structure of the brain and our neurohormonal pathways, by the way, all this is there in my book, The Heart of Wellness. So there is this limbic system in the brain, which is the one, you can say it is the intermediary between that causal body and all those vasanas, and how we actually react and respond in the world. It triggers those emotional and psychic responses. And this limbic system is closely connected with the hypothalamus, and the hypothalamus is connected to the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland is the master endocrine gland, and the hypothalamus is connected to the autonomic nervous system. And so this whole cascade of these neural impulses and the hormonal pathways begins with this. But once you start reining in those horses, these biochemical processes start to change in your body at the cellular level, and then at the level of the glands, at the level of these neural impulses. And that's how these, vasana seeds are burnt up, are sanskaras. That's another word for it, sanskara. They are burnt up. So the whole issue here is, can we cultivate this reverence for Devi, Shri. And so that brings us to the second of the Ashtalakshmis, who is Mahalakshmi. So here, the shadow is disdain, impatience, lack of reverence. Whereas the light, right? The light of Mahalakshmi is sanctity, absolute reverence in every way, in all forms. So when we say Mahalakshmi, and again, what happens to us is that we are extremely influenced by the Vaishnava tradition, where Lakshmi is sitting at the feet of Vishnu, and she's given this role as a consort, right? And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, because again, there is a misunderstanding there. But for us as Shaktas, we need to understand the importance of Mahalakshmi. So Mahalakshmi is considered to be the supreme divinity who manifests, actually, if you look at the Devi Mahatmyam, it is Mahalakshmi who manifests as Mahakali and Mahasaraswati. So she is the manifestation in Prakriti of the three gunas: Tamas, Rajas, and Sattva. Okay, so she is basically the culmination. So if you read the Devi Mahatmya, you see, you come to this episode where Mahishasura has created havoc, and all the devas and everyone, they invoke Shakti, and she manifests herself, and all of the devas' powers are in her. That is Mahalakshmi. Okay, so what happens in here, they describe that actually Mahalakshmi is the primordial energy, and at the first movement of creation, it is she who manifests as the first movement of creation, Mahalakshmi. So she's both form and formless. She's the manifest and the unmanifest, which is why she's called Ishwari. She is the one that governs, or she rules over everything. So there is this whole, cult of Mahalakshmi, and a tantric cult, actually. In that, we see that Mahalakshmi, she creates or starts the process of creation from the void, from nothingness. And she she herself creates Mahakali, Mahasaraswati, and then she herself creates these male forms of Brahma, Vishnu, and Maheshwara, or Rudra. She creates these male forms, and then she pairs them up. And she says, okay, Mahasaraswati, you go with Brahma. Mahakali, you go with Rudra, and I will stay with Vishnu. So she creates everything. This whole process of creation, sustenance, and destruction is created by Mahalakshmi. So the whole issue, you know, that whole lore and the importance of the Devi Mahatmya is really too much to talk about here. But I just want you to know that you should not limit yourself to thinking of Mahalakshmi as the consort of Vishnu. That is not who we are invoking in the Śrī Sūktam. Okay, here we are invoking Shri as that supreme Brahman, as that Ka. Okay, that creative intelligence, who is the formless supreme reality. So if we are invoking this Mahalakshmi, shouldn't we have this kind of absolute reverence for her? So think about it. It is said that, you know, if you really want Lakshmi to come to your house, get your house in order. Get rid of all the clutter. She does not like to stay in messy, cluttered places. She's high maintenance. So, you know, that ability, that, you know, one of the yamas and niyamas of the Yoga Sutras is shaucha, cleanliness, purity. And that is really important in the sadhana of Lakshmi, especially the Śrī Sūkta sadhana. And there are particular sadhanas of the Śrī Sūkta, and it's extremely strict because of this idea of sanctity. For instance, you know, if you took my puja course, I said in that, you cannot sit for puja or do this ritual without taking a bath. It's non-negotiable. I don't care what your water problem is. Irrelevant that there is a shortage of water, the world has water problems, whatever it may be, irrelevant. You cannot do the ritual without taking a bath. You know, in the Hindu culture, for instance, we worship books as, you know, forms of Saraswati. You know, it's like unheard of that you would walk over books, step on books, or, you know, stand on paper. You just don't do that because of this reverence for knowledge. So of course, you know, those who are really, those of you who really have this non-dual lingo on, you might say, well, isn't everything divine? Yes, of course. But please talk to me when that is your actual experience. When you don't find any difference between your own children and, say, the politician you hate, then talk to me. Don't bring in non-dual concepts when it is convenient for you. There are certain things. These rituals have, you know, the whole idea of upasana is to live in that way, to live aligned with that, you know, that view. And that view is that there is this fundamental sanctity that we need to have for Mahalakshmi. So that is the whole purpose of this ritual and puja, right? It's because it's not just about cleanliness and doing things a certain way. It is that cultivation of that single pointedness, where again and again you're reining in your mind to be here, to recognize Shri in every single action of the puja or the ritual, without getting bored, without finding shortcuts, without skipping steps. That's a huge part of this whole Sri Vidya rituals. And there is a huge significance to that, and that is this. So when we offer everything in this type of a sanctity mindset, that's when we become upasakas. That's when we actually start to experience this non-duality, that everything is sacred. So there is Matangi. Matangi is one of the Dasha Mahavidyas. And she is known as the Prime Minister of Lalita Mahatripura Sundari. And Matangi is also known as Uchishta Chandali. That means she is, she kind of lives on the outskirts of existence. Where, the tantric texts say that her ritual is actually done without following all these rules of cleanliness and sanctity. So ordinarily, if you would offer your food first to Devi and then eat it, to Matangi, you would do the opposite. You eat first and then you give her the leftovers. And you offer her things that are absolutely forbidden, such as menstrual blood. And people think, especially the liberated women these days, they think, okay, I want to do Matangi sadhana because it appeals to my, my activist mind. That is the wrong way of approaching Matangi. Because even there are rules for sanctity. If you're offering menstrual blood, that means you have gotten over the idea that there is anything wrong with it. If you're offering your leftover food, that means you know that Devi has already eaten in you as part of you, in you. She is that fire of digestion. She is the one that eats. She is the one that lives in this body. You already have come to that realization, not an intellectual understanding. That is the purpose of doing Matangi sadhana like that. Unless you have that mindset, you can't do those transgressive practices as rebellion. That's not the point of it. So, see, what happens to us ordinarily is that we dismiss our bodies. We let it go. We are always constantly putting junk into it. We're always taking in junk through our senses. And we have this kind of disdain and dismissal. And then we have a million excuses for what it is, for doing what we do. My job does not allow me to sleep at 10 o'clock. It's my job. I have to do this. I can't eat like this because of blah, blah, blah. Complete dismissal. There's no sanctity in your lifestyle. It's haywire. But you want Shri to come there. And I told you, she doesn't like clutter. Not just in your external surroundings, even internally. So we also have this kind of a disdain for our own patterns. See, yesterday I gave you homework and I said, contemplate whether self-blame is a responsibility. It's not. I hope you came to the same conclusion. Blaming yourself is dismissing yourself, is disdain for yourself. You don't have sanctity for your own thought process. So cultivating sanctity is the next step after you take responsibility. You say, yes, I have the ability to think. Imagine that. I have the ability to say no to my mind and direct these horses to where I want them to go. Whatever has happened in the past, I don't need to blame anyone, including myself, because I value the sanctity of my mind. I revere this mind as Devi herself. So I'm not going to beat myself up, because beating myself up is like beating up Devi. I can't do that. You see, you cultivate this immense self-respect for yourself when you approach something from the level of reverence and sanctity. I can't do that. It's not allowed. You know, I think in one of the courses I said, you know, in Sri Vidya, you can't fast. Fasting is not, you know, whereas fasting is a discipline in many traditions, not in Sri Vidya. You know why? Because in Sri Vidya, Lalita Mahatripura Sundari lives inside you. And you can't starve her. You must feed her. You see what a sweet thing that is? She lives in me. How am I going to behave? How can I rise to the occasion? Because here she is with her horses and her chariot and the elephants. Can I welcome her? Right? So infusing sanctity into even our own non-serving patterns is what creates and shifts into miraculous things. That is how we invite abundance, through sanctity. So just this week, I saw this woman, patient, who is upper 70s. I think she's 77, 78. And I was complimenting her and saying, you're doing so wonderfully well. And she started telling me about her story. And she said, you know, my husband, we have been together for 63 years. And early on, my husband used to smoke. And I never liked it. And I used to fight with him. And then what happened is I stopped fighting with him because that really didn't get us anywhere. And then he got really sick. He got very sick and he couldn't smoke anymore. And you know what? She was telling me, you know what? That sickness was actually a gift. And I said, yeah, that's why you're doing so well. So if we can take all of our life circumstances as a gift, as Devi herself, that is the best way of revering her, of cultivating sanctity. Otherwise, whatever it is that we are dismissing in our lives, we are dismissing her. Plain and simple, right? So in this way, we cultivate what I call sacred relating. And sacred relating is not one of posturing. It's one of openness, of flow, ardran jvalanti. It's flowing. It is this water-like flow of what? Of the fire of discernment. So it's the mixture of fire and water, which is continuously flowing. Right? It blazes through, in this application of tarka, logic. But it is sacred because of openness. You're not excluding anything in your sadhana. You're not excluding anything in your life. Everything is invited. In fact, you are inviting somebody's pain, somebody's abuse. And I know, and again, don't get all worked up about this. Oh, if I'm being abused, what about the women who are abused? I don't mean that. I mean this thing that we keep ourselves closed off in fear and keep others away. That is what I'm talking about. Of course, get yourself out of an abusive situation. Nobody is asking you to stay in that. But after the fact, or even when you're doing through, can you be open? Where you are not resenting that person. And you realize everybody is doing things because of their own causal body, their vasanas. So our job is to stay open, even when we are taking really tough decisions. Even when I am making decisions where I remove myself from harmful situations, I'm still open. Can I do that? And so when you welcome all of these things into your life and into your sadhana, as Devi herself, that creates this, sanctity, this column of gold. So that is the, my interpretation of these two verses and the invocation of Mahalakshmi. So, homework. What is sacred in your life? What is non-negotiably sacred in your life, and what isn't? Think about that. What are your buckets of sacred and not sacred? What is dispensable and what is not dispensable? What is dismissible and what isn't dismissible? And don't exclude anything here. Think about, yourself, your body, your health, your habits, your lifestyle, and your work, your relationships, past and present. And really give it a good thought. Do you approach them with a sense of sacredness and reverence? Or do you reserve that for only a few things? What would happen if you opened to sacredness? And why is something dispensable and why is something else not dispensable? Let's think about these things. So we'll stop here. I'll stop the recording and then I'll take questions. Shri Matre Namaha.